Welcome to Not Good Enough Stuff. I'm Mary Beth Fox, licensed professional counselor, and every week we'll question the messages planted by family, society, culture, and life experiences that shaped your identity and became the voice in your head. We'll explore how you got where you are, why you learned to see yourself the way you do, and call bullshit on the messages that were never true in the first place. Because who you are and who you were shaped to be are not always the same. You will learn ways to begin returning to your true soul identity. Tomorrow, August 4th, is 16 years since I was almost killed by a drunk driver. And I want to talk about how that became my identity for a very long time. And as I'm talking about this and some of the other experiences in my life that I went through that became my identity, I want you to be thinking about what are the stories of your life, the difficult things that you have been through that you use to define yourself, that you use to determine that you have worth, that you use to feel like what you have to say and what you have experienced is important enough for people to then hear you, listen to you, and have compassion for you, or whatever that might be. Think about what those are for you. So I'm going to give a very short snippet of the wreck. And the reason I'm not going to go into much detail is because I spent too many years telling every single little detail and every little situation that was difficult for me and all of the surgeries that I've been through and continue to have, because that was how I got attention and how I decided that I had worth. So, like I said, 16 years ago, I was hit by a drunk driver. I was hit head on, and I had what's called subluxation of C1 and C2, the hangman's death. I was told that I was paralyzed and that it was permanent. Thankfully, it was not. And it did completely alter the rest of my life moving forward. And at the same time, it also got me to the point of going to therapy and then becoming a therapist to be able to help people heal in the ways that I had learned to heal. So even though there was a major impact and it was terrible for me, and I still deal with issues from that and always will, there was still something wonderful that came from it, but it still was not my identity. Another way that I think a lot of people shape their identity around and what they tell people about themselves is based on their childhoods. And I know that one well, because before my wreck, for many years, my identity was somebody who experienced childhood trauma from an alcoholic father and from having an emotionally unavailable mother. That was my identity. I thought that that was who I was. And that's what I would tell people. But that wasn't my identity. That was something that I went through that was difficult. But guess what? I was still a worthy person before that. And I'll be honest, about a year and a half ago, making my identity based on things that had happened to me and things that I was experiencing popped right back up again. I was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a genetic connective tissue disorder, and it affects everything head to toe and causes a lot of chronic pain. And that, for several months, became my identity. I wanted everybody to know about it. I wanted everybody to know how it affected me, what I couldn't do anymore, what all was happening to me on a daily basis, the severity of pain that I dealt with every day. That became who I thought I was. Now, I don't want you to start thinking that I'm saying that these things don't matter or that they're not important, because they absolutely are. But the problem becomes when we think that that is who we are and that that is all we are. But it's normal for our brains to organize our life into these stories. They help us make sense of what we've been through. They help us make sense of the pain. But there's a major problem with that. We begin believing that because this happened to me, because I have this is who I am. There is a huge difference, though. These experiences shape us, but they are not us. So in order to kind of prove this point, I want you to think about a little baby or a young child. Would you ever say or think about that little baby or child that he or she didn't have any worth? Hopefully your answer is no. And if it's yes, then please stop now, because what I talk about is not for you. But if you believe that a sweet little baby has worth and it's yet to have been diagnosed with these things or gone through these traumatic events or just difficult things in life and still has worth, then how can you decide that your worth is based on these things that you have experienced? Both of those can't exist. You had worth before you experienced difficult stuff in life. Now let's look at, why do we do that, though? Why do we decide that our identity and our worth is based upon the things that we've been through? I'm going to tell you the answer based on why I've done it and why I've seen the clients that I've seen have done it. And that is because our not good enough stuff is driving it. Our feelings of not being good enough that came from the messages we received from a very young age from family, society, and culture told us that we were not good enough. And so when we have that inner critic telling us throughout our entire lives that we are not good enough, we then begin searching for ways to prove that we are. And so when we go through something difficult that people will recognize as having been difficult, or that will praise you or think highly of you because you survived this, we then think we're good enough to share that with others, good enough to exist, good enough to have survived. But that's never the case. We are always good enough. And I can explain this based on our similarities to a tree. The roots of the tree, or ourselves, are the experiences that we've been through. But the trunk is where our identity has become formed. And so when painful experiences happen to us, we kind of wrap them around the trunk until we can't tell where the experience ends and our true identity begins. So what are some of the things that you have experienced that you can admit that you have told those stories over and over and over to gain attention? Now, nobody wants to admit that they do things for attention, but we all do. How does it feel for you after you tell these stories? Do you feel like, wow, that person heard me? Oh, they think that I'm incredible because I survived this. Oh, they really feel sorry for me. Maybe they'll give me more support. Maybe they'll spend more time with me. Or maybe they will see how just amazing I am. Be honest with yourself, because I think everybody has done this at some point in their lives. But here's the truth. It was never your identity. None of it. The wreck wasn't my identity. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is not my identity. having an alcoholic father and an emotionally unavailable mother is not my identity. They are not me. And so we have to look at who we were before these difficult things happened. And most people struggle to know who they are. That is a very difficult thing for people to truly understand who they are. So when we don't know who we are, we search for ways to determine who we believe we are, or to determine what society, family, or culture believes we should be or believes that we are. But none of those are ever true. We have to figure out who we were separate from our life experiences. And that does not mean that those difficult things did not shape us in very significant ways, because they did. But it doesn't mean it changed who we are or that it is who we are. It means it is a part of our story, but not our identity. When I think about the ways that a lot of people shape their identity based on things that they've gone through, some of the top ones that come to my mind are cancer survivors. Think about the little stickers that you see on cars and things that say somebody has survived cancer. Think about shirts that you see people wearing for that. Think about some of the men that I often see, the older men who wear the hat that says Marine, when the slogan is, once a Marine, always a Marine. Think about people who have mental illness and their identity becomes depression or anxiety. Think about how people who have disabilities or chronic illness, that becomes their identity. They shape their lives around that and around telling everybody that that's who they are. One of the reasons that it can be really damaging for us to shape our identities based on experiences that we've been through is that what happens when we are better? What happens when you survive cancer? What happens when you change careers? What happens when you retire? What happens when your children leave the home and your identity was a mother or a father? Then we sit and feel worthless, and we don't know what to do. We don't know who we are, and we feel lost because our identities were attached to those things. And that's often when a lot of people go into depression, because they were living based on what they believed were their identities, which means they never knew who they truly were. And so when we lose one of those, or we move past it, or we recover, then we are at a place of not knowing who we are. And that can be a really dangerous thing. Because if we don't know who we are, then how do we know how to live? When we base our identity and worth and value on these experiences, I want you to know something very important. Your worth did not increase because you survived something. And it didn't increase because something terrible happened to you. Your value has never depended on your story. And I think that many people kind of secretly believe, like I did for many years, that I'm valuable because I overcame something. I'm valuable because I survived what kills most people. I'm valuable because I help people, because I'm a therapist. Those are all conditional, Because like I said, what happens when those are no longer prominent or those are no longer a part of your life? Then you don't believe that you have worth. But real worth exists before achievement, before suffering, before healing, before the diagnosis. Before we continue, if today's episode is resonating with you, I've created a free therapist-written guide to help you understand where your not good enough beliefs came from and why they've stayed with you for so long. You can download it free at theinnerchildtherapist.com. Now, let's get back to today's episode. So, what are some of the ways that you are ready to start releasing your identity being based on what you survived, the difficult things that you have been through, or the roles that you have had in life? And when you strip those away, what are you willing to do to discover who you truly are? Think about that. Because if you stripped away every diagnosis, every title, every success, every failure, every trauma, every accomplishment, every relationship, who would you be? Because who you are existed before all of those. But it doesn't mean that you knew who you were, because most people don't. But the important thing is to start recognizing when you tell the stories that you have told for so many years about things that you have been through, and ask yourself if you believe you have worth because of those. And if the answer is yes, then I want to challenge you, because it's just simply not true. You didn't become worthy or good enough because of what you went through. So I really want you to spend some time thinking about and allowing yourself to be vulnerable with yourself, to identify what stories you have based your identity on and how that has affected you. I also want to be very clear that all of these things that I've named are significant, and they do change your life in a lot of ways, but they don't change your identity. Your experiences matter. They deserve to be acknowledged. They deserve to be grieved. They deserve to be honored, but they were never meant to become your identity. You are so much more than the stories you have lived. I hope after listening to this that you are trying to identify some of the ways that you have based your worth and your identity on the things that you have been through. And to be able to start separating your identity from those experiences. It's okay if you don't know who you are without those, because there are things that you can do to begin learning who you truly are and always were before all of these things happened. And I'll probably do a podcast episode pretty soon on that. But just know that it's okay not to know who you are yet, because it can take a long time to discover that, and there's no wrong way to do it unless you just don't do it at all. But I want to say this one more time. You are so much more than the stories you've lived. And as always, you are good enough.
If this episode helped you see
always
yourself
have
differently,
been,
I'd
and
love
you
for you to follow
always
my podcast and leave a
be.
review. It helps more people discover the Not Good Enough Stuff framework and these conversations. New episodes are released every Tuesday. If you need reminders between episodes to keep questioning the messages that shaped you, follow me on social media at The Inner Child Therapist. You'll also find my blog, newsletter, and free resources at theinnerchildtherapist.com. All of the links are in the show notes. Remember, you are not lost. Your true soul identity is still there. And the voice in your head isn't always yours. Question it. I'll see you next Tuesday.